Hello, I'm Robin Vincent and welcome to the September edition of Molten Music Monthly. It's September, it's Norfolk, and while the world is undergoing massive climate transformations, my shed has blossomed into this gorgeous cascade of red Virginia creeper behind me. But this month in the world of music technology, we have new keyboards and a new machine from Native Instruments. SyndtSphere pulls sounds out of space. The Noodler wants to play with all your gear. Intruso wants plants to play with your gear. Roland thinks we want a boutique D50. VCV Rack may well beat Softube Modular at its own game. Axon 2 sparks the apocalypse with its machine learning drum synth. Mutable Instruments keep discontinuing really great modules. Bitwig gets its Ableton Link. T-Rax reaches version 5 and will make your music sound like everybody else's. And a newsflash, this just in, Propellerheads announce Reason 10, and it has a new synth or two. All this and the extraordinary, not to be missed, grab yourself a bargain, ex-demo sale of a whole load of weird musical stuff that I've got stashed at the back of the shed. There's some fabulous stuff in there and I've got to fund this modular habit somehow. But first I wanted to give a shout out to possibly the most beautiful, interesting and engaging music magazine ever to come out of Norwich, or possibly the world. And that is Electronic Sound magazine. It's an awesome electronic music and music technology magazine. In its pages, it sort of blends together music from an eclectic array of electronic musicians. It then features synthesizers and interviews with artists, all wrapped up in this extremely tactile and beautiful magazine. I mean, this month, obviously, it's got Gary Newman on the front, but there's also interviews with Hannah Peel and Sparks, and there's a look at how Mike Oldfield put together that old Blue Peter theme. You know, it's both sort of surprising and engaging. There's stuff in there that you know about and stuff that you've just never ever heard of. It's genuinely a pleasing publication, and it's only available as a magazine. There's no online version, no, only physical, and it's physically extremely nice. They also do it with a vinyl single that's relevant to some artist or others in here. So at the moment there's a mix of a new Gary Newman track. And you can get the magazine either with it or without it. So Electronic Sound magazine, I heartily recommend you go and check it out. And it's made, built, designed and published right here in Norfolk. Native Instruments have sent me a Kontrol S49 Mk3 to review. Very exciting. They've released this along with a new Maschine Mk3, and it comes with these big screens on it, this dual screen affair that can feed you a whole load of information from Complete and from the control software so that you can easily select presets and browse through all the sounds on your system. One of the cool new things is that as you move through, it auditions the sounds for you. It doesn't load up the instrument and give you a bleep. No, these are all sort of samples that have been added in so that every single preset in the entire Complete Ultimate bundle has a little sample that you can audition as you scan through them. It's kind of a bit like dialing your way through a radio, but it's also enormously helpful and quick. Well, I've done a little first impressions video which you can go and check out, but I'm going to spend a bit of time with it and see if I can dig down into what this can actually do. I'm trying to decide whether the little screens on it that browse through the presets and browse through the complete sounds is helpful or not helpful. Am I being dragged away unnecessarily from the computer screen? Is it helpful to be looking more at the keyboard or at the screen or at both? Do I get the two confused? I don't know. How does this workflow work, and how well does it work and integrate in with my DAW and other bits of MIDI equipment? This is what I want to have a look at. I want to do the whole thing, the whole deal, the whole in-depth Molten review on this thing. The Maschine Mk3 is also very interesting. Again, it has the two screens, but probably more importantly is that they've finally built in an audio interface. So you don't need to use another piece of hardware. You can just have the machine itself with audio going in and out for your sampling and your playback. Perfect, that's exactly what it's needed all this time. So that's looking pretty groovy. This is a spherical, polyphonic, virtual morphing synthesizer by my favourite understated software developer called Knucklebones. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that right. It has a perfectly simple interface where you just drag your finger or your mouse around in this kind of 3D space to rotate this cloud of presets and sounds, and as the sounds come towards the front they get morphed into other sounds that are going away. It's sort of this very organic feel of movement and sounds running into each other and running out of each other. It's just brilliant. I mean, it's simple. That's more or less the only control. They call it the Sound Surfer Synth, and it's based on their Synth polyphonic synthesizer. And it has about 70 presets scattered around in this 3D space that you can manipulate and pull and push away from you. It's loads of fun and it's completely free. Go check it out. The NDLR, or Noodler as they're calling it, is a load of fun. It's a box that will play your gear. You plug things into it and it will play it. It's kind of like an arpeggiator. They call it an arpeggiator, but it's kind of more than that. It does have this lean, rather alarmingly, towards some kind of automatic accompaniment type of box, like something you'd find in a home keyboard. But it's not that. It's not as naff as that, I don't think. It's kind of got 4 channels. It's got a bass line, so you've got patterns for basses. You send it off to a bass synth. It's got a lead line, or a motif as they call it, which you can send off to a more leady, high frequency synthesizer. It has a chord, which you can either send out to one polyphonic synth, or you can chain it to 4 different mono synths to create that chord for you. And then at the bottom, it's got a drone, which is kind of using the root note. The idea is that you just dial in various chords and chord progressions, and it plays your stuff. You can select different patterns, you can modulate the patterns in different ways and route things to and from each other to mess it about a bit, but ultimately you're just setting it going and it'll play your stuff. But why would that be interesting? Well, for me that's interesting because of the idea that you can just set something going, a chord progression perhaps, or just one thing going, and then you play with your synths. You just tweak, you know, you sound sculpt, you look into the depths and details of your synthesizers that's all playing back for you, that you haven't spent hours trying to craft a song. You've just set it going and you are tweaking and going away. I mean, that's generally what everyone uses arpeggiators for anyway, isn't it? You press hold, you stick down a couple of notes, and then you just play messing with the sound. And this does that in abundance and to different things all at once. You can control up to 8 MIDI devices, I believe, all at once, which is pretty awesome. Although I have to say, I can't quite decide whether it's awesome or a bit naff. It's somewhere in between that, depending on your attitude towards it, I think. And at the moment, I think it's great. But tomorrow I might think, oh no, that's just terrible. But oh, I think, no. Yes, the Noodler. Go check it out. Now this is a beautiful module that sucks biometric feedback out of the very living tissue of plants and probably animals. It uses organic material to influence control voltages. How does it do that? Well, I don't know. It kind of takes some kind of electrical charge off the surface, off the skin, off the leaf of the plant, and then uses that to generate control voltages in new and interesting and fascinating ways. The practical use of it is that you plug your pot plant into it and it will start generating stuff depending on what the plant is feeling like, I suppose. It's based on an open source idea called MIDI Sprout by Data Garden, which uses biometric feedback to generate MIDI notes and stuff like that. But this is based on control voltage. And the module itself, built by Intruso, is just a beautiful thing. The leaf and the LEDs behind it that kind of show the intensity of the generation of what's going on. You can force it into more chromatic things, or you can just let it go into its own kind of world of craziness. Does it sound different with different plants? Who knows? That's the sort of thing I'd quite like to find out. It's a very beautiful concept, and DivKid did a video on it from Modular Meet in Leeds, which I think is the only video on it at the moment. So do go and check that out because it's extraordinarily interesting. The Roland Boutique D05. People seem really impressed by this. I really wanted a Roland D10 when I was young and awesome. And when I was 18, my dad actually bought a Roland E20, which is like the arranger home keyboard version of linear arithmetic synthesis. And it contains a whole load of the same sort of sounds as the D range of synths had. Check this out. Well, later on I had a girlfriend who had a Roland D20, which is the same sort of thing, but with an inbuilt sequencer. And I built a whole load of tracks on that, like this one. So as for the D50, it's kind of like the daddy of all those other synths, and a source of a number of very cheesy sounds from the late 80s and early 90s. Apparently that's classic now and desirable, although I don't know, I'm not entirely sure that I get it. I mean, there's that soundtrack sound that we heard a lot and continue to hear. There's that electric piano type stabby sound and brassy sounds. I don't know, I'm just not sure that I'm into it. I mean, the one thing that the D series was almost impossible to program. And the great thing is that with the boutique D05, Roland have authentically emulated the bastard programming. So it's only got a handful of buttons. You're going to have to menu dive like crazy to get inside it. It's nuts. Why would you do that? Why would you reinvent and reissue a synthesizer that's really hard to program and leave it really hard to program? I mean, maybe that's part of the culture, the joy of it, the authenticity of understanding vintage hardware in the reality of what it perhaps was. Nah, I mean, they invented this enormous programmer just to open up the parameters to a little bit more hands-on control, but that's not included with the D05. Maybe one will come along, or I don't know. But in the meantime, what we have is the Roland D50 reinvented as the boutique D05 with all the sounds. It sounds fabulous. I mean, it's not an actual D50, it's a digitally circuit modeled version of the D50, but it will sound the same. It will sound the same. And if that's your thing, if that's your bag, if that's what you like, then that's going to be awesome. But for me, no thank you. Now this is quite something, the VCV Rack, which is remarkably difficult to say, but it's a fabulous virtual modular Eurorack system. I mean, I've already looked at Softube Modular in some depth, and that's a fabulous piece of software, but this has just kind of come along out of nowhere and is offering everything that Softube Modular seems to be doing, but kind of with more and better and cleaner and leaner than Softube Modular. And at the moment, in beta version, it's completely free. So the most immediate difference that you see is that they've modeled a whole bunch of really cool modules. I mean, Softube Modular is great, but it has a lot of DOFA stuff in there and a lot of stuff which is actually a bit dreary on the whole. There's very few bits in there which are really pizzazz and exciting and do interesting things. Whereas in here, they've gone straight for Mutable Instruments. You've got clouds and veils and the wobbly one and the juju one and the wide one and the thin one and the braids and the peak and the trumpet. You know, all of that lovely mutable creative stuff. So if you ever wanted to know what clouds actually sounds like, now you can. You can plug that together and run things through it, and you completely have got the very nature of clouds. They've also got some modules by Befeco and one by Synthesis Technology called the E340, which is also, funny enough, a cloud generator. So there's some fabulously creative and interesting modules in there for you to play with for free. I mean, it looks fabulous. You slap your stuff up, you patch it together, the patch cables look great, you can adjust the tension, and it works. It works directly. At the moment, it's standalone on your desktop, running directly to your audio interface, but they are developing a plug-in version. They're also developing a paid-for version, which is a bit of a shame, but it's inevitable, I guess, and not to be sneered at. But they are heading for around about a Christmas release where there will be the ability to buy further modules into the system. But as a starting pack, you've got a couple of dozen modules which are really very, very good, and you can wire them together now for free and really get stuck into a bit of modular goodness on your desktop without having to buy a power supply or a case or mess around with any of that sort of nonsense. The only thing at the moment is that it doesn't work very well with touch. I'm finding none of the knobs move and stuff like that, which is a bit of a shame. And also, there doesn't seem to be an LFO. I can't find one. There must be one in there somewhere, but I don't know how you modulate stuff. There must be something in there that I'm missing. So please, tell me all about it in the comments below. When they talk about the origins of the machine apocalypse, They will point to the ground zero moment of Axon 2. They'll talk about how the artificial intelligence evolved from within this drum synth, taking on new rhythms and new ideas, refeeding back into itself until it built exponentially into this mammoth rhythm-generating beast that undermined the whole of mankind's authority on the earth, robbing us of dignity, robbing us of control over our own beats. Axon 2 is an AI-driven percussion synth. There's neurons which trigger voices and then have an existential crisis as to whether to trigger another one or not. There are 7 two-operator FM voices, all of which can be triggered by their own neutrons, or not. Or they can combine together to create a complex brain of overwhelming subtlety and percussive architecture that can only inevitably lead to the generation of unexplained percussive life. Luckily, it has an inbuilt drawn reciprocation dingle arm to reduce sinusoidal deplenation, which is very lucky, otherwise it'll all be in trouble. Bitwig Studio version 2 is about to be released, and at last it has Ableton Link. Ableton Link is a fantastic technology that allows different bits of musical software on different devices to stay in sync over the same network. So you've got your desktop and your laptop on the same network running Ableton Link. One could run Reactor, one could run Ableton, you could have an iPhone running something else like the Launchpad, and now another one running Bitwig Studio, and have them all just sync just over the network, just like that. No messing about with MIDI, no messing about with sync cables and all sorts of nonsense. It just works. It's awesome. I did a video syncing Ableton Live and Reactor on 2 different surfaces, and it's just ridiculously simple, and is the sort of thing that should have been there always and forever. But now Bitwig Studio 2.2, that now has it, which is brilliant. And no doubt I'll do a quick video on that as soon as it's released next month. They've also thrown in a bunch of new modulators, including a sample and hold one, which sounds really nice, and something to do with timing, and 3 GB worth of new content. So that's nice. Something weird is going on with Mutable Instruments. I mean, Mutable Instruments create some of the most interesting modules for Eurorack. I mean, interesting in as much as they seem to be creative and different and set apart from other usual analog modules. These are more digital, but thoughtful. Somehow they drag you into interesting places and let you patch things together that you probably wouldn't have thought of. But they've just started discontinuing things, kind of unexpectedly. First of all, Peaks went. I mean, Peaks is this little module that can be an envelope, an LFO, a trigger, or a drum synth, strangely. So it's kind of multi-purpose and not really very focused. So that one dropped away first, but it's massively popular. The second one to be discontinued is Braids. Now, Braids is this enormous oscillator module. It's the one that everybody told me to get. It was recommended to me time and time again when I was first looking into Eurorack. And it's got a load of sounds in there, just tons and tons of waveforms, different forms of synthesis, physical modeling, FM, all sorts of stuff in there. I mean, it's an endless source of sounds. But Oliver from Mutable Instruments has kind of found that people are using it as a secondary oscillator. People are using it to beef up things or as an afterthought. It's not really the focus of anybody's work. And he's sort of come to the decision that he could make an oscillator which is much better and much more focused, that would fulfill that role much smoother than a Braids does. Braids is kind of overly complex. There's menus and diving to get through. I mean, that massive sort of LED display on the front is interesting and it draws you in, but it's also hard to work with if you're trying to go through menus. So he's made a decision, just like that, to stop making it. I mean, he can do what he likes. He makes all these modules, and they have quite a large range, maybe too many. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe the broadness of what they offer is starting to, I don't know, become a philosophical crisis. And so he's decided to pare it down, to bring it back perhaps to the ones which he really feels are offering something special in the marketplace and to the Eurorack community. And meanwhile, he can gather his strength and his thoughts and pursue more interesting modules. Apparently there are more cuts to come. I mean, it's been rumoured that Clouds might go, which is interesting because that's the other module that everyone recommended I should get. It was Braids, Clouds, and Maths, of course. Make noise, Maths. But these modules have been around a while, so maybe it is time for something new and exciting. I hope so. I mean, I'm very interested in everything that Mutable Instruments do because they just have a vibe and an angle, and there's a quality to their work that I really like very much. But at the same time, it's very sad to see braids discontinued. I love T-Rex. I love it for all its cartoony sort of cheesiness. I love it for the big fat warm sound that it throws around everything, and I love it because it fills in all the gaps in my own knowledge and skills as an audio engineer. I've had it since the very beginning, and I've found it honestly a very useful tool for mastering. The new version has 38 audio processors within it, all with fabulous interfaces and knobs and glowing bits and stuff. It's also got wave editing in, so you can do some basic sort of trimming and fading and bits and pieces on that. And it goes all the way to allowing you to put together your track list for an album. T-Rex has got some great metering. The metering has always been fantastic. I mean, one of the best things about it for me, because I don't know very much about mastering really, is that it would give you kind of an area on the meter to aim for. So if you were sort of doing rock type music, it would say, aim for this kind of level of perceived loudness. They had a perceived loudness meter. And I find that enormously helpful, just to have something to aim for, because it's like, what am I trying to do? I've got all these knobs and things. Am I trying to boost everything? Am I trying to do this? Where does it need to be louder? Where does it need to be more dynamic? And visual guides like that, because my ears are generally crap, some kind of visual guide so that I know I'm in kind of the ballpark of what I'm after, what I'm trying to sound like. I found that really helpful. I know I shouldn't. I know I should do it all by ear, but I can't and I don't, so something like T-Rex is very helpful. But in version 5, they have this new thing called Master Match. Now this is genius in some ways. You get your favorite track, your favorite song or something, slap it in, and T-Rex will go, and then you stick your track in and it'll apply the sort of the shape of the sound to your track. So it steals the mastering features, if you like, from an existing track and applies them to yours. Awesome. So if you've got a track that you like the sound of, then you can just apply all of that to your own track. Bam! I mean, it's the surest way to make everything sound the same, which doesn't sound like a good thing, but actually that's probably what we're trying to achieve more or less all of the time. We just want to sound like the stuff you hear on the radio. Of course we don't want to do that. No, we want to be individual and so dynamically present that everyone has to turn their radio up massively just to hear the undercurrents of your music, and then they have to turn it down again when it comes a bit more fully formed. Really? No, we just want it to sound good. You know, T-Rex is one of those bits of software that says that might as well at the top just have a make me sound good button, and you do that and it makes it sound good. I mean, in my experience, just dropping your final mix into T-Rex and turning it on makes it sound better. And for that alone, it's worth it, I think. Now, cables are always totally fascinating, but Hosa are trying to drum up a little bit of interest in some of its new toys and tools. One of them is a 5-prong, 5-in-1 Molt cable CV splitter, audio splitter thingy. The idea being that you take whatever signal, plug it into one of them, and it all pours out of the other prongs, and then you plug that into different things on your modular. And then it just kind of hangs around on the end of your patch cables, getting in the way. But it's a really simple and easy way to split a signal to different destinations. And they are calling it the Knucklebones, which is a really good name. Less of a good name, but no less useful, is Hopscotch, which is a patch cable that has another patch cable coming off it with a little socket on the end. So you can plug this patch cable in and then kind of piggyback another one. It's a bit like stackable cables, but without having to build that enormous tower that sort of wobbles off the front of your Eurorack. So it just gives you a simple, neat way to split a cable to stick something to another destination. Apparently they have a load of interesting sort of toys and tools coming along very soon, so we're going to keep my eye on Hosa. October the 7th is Synth Fest in Sheffield. It's probably the biggest synthesizer show in the UK. Probably? Yeah, I think it probably is. Everyone will be there, all the main synth manufacturers. There'll be a whole load of synthesizer stuff to play on, and a whole load of modular as well. Both Moog Modular and Eurorack Modular, all sorts of manufacturers are going to be there showing their stuff, letting you have a play, and modular users will be coming along just to show off their gear. I went along last year and it was the thing that kick-started my interest in Eurorack Modular. It was a fantastic day. I had such a good time and talked to some great people who were able to communicate the passion behind this form of synthesis to me so well that I was just caught up in it. I had to pursue it. I had to go and find out more about it. And now I have my own Eurorack, 2 rows of modular stuff that I'm playing with. And it's brilliant, and I love it. And I've never enjoyed synthesis as much. I mean, I enjoy playing on big synthesizers. That's fine. You can do that at Synth Fest as well, because it's open to that as well. But it's in the modules and the way these things go together and the way the music generates and pours out of these custom-made machines is just amazing. I love it. Anyway, there will be all these manufacturers there, there will be people with their stuff, but there will also be talks and seminars and workshops and performances throughout the day. So if you want to have the opportunity to find out what all this is all about, then come along. It's in Sheffield. It will cost you £10 in advance or £15 on the door, and kids are free. I'm bringing mine. So come along and feel free to say hello, and we can stand around in an awkward silence for a bit. That would be great. That's the 7th of October. Put it in your diary. So just as I was editing this month's video, Propellerheads announced that they are releasing Reason 10 in October. So I thought I'd better say something about that. The big sort of tagline they've got going for it is that it's got more of everything, which is great because it hasn't had more of anything hardly ever. It was 2007. 2007 was the last time they released a proper fully fledged synthesizer within their enormous synthesizer workstation. That's 10 years since Thor came along. Now don't get me wrong, there's been plenty of good stuff since then, since Reason 4, which is what brought Thor along. In the 6th version since, there's been some great stuff with audio recording and vocal comping and pitch correction, those MIDI devices they've brought in, acres and acres of samples and content. There's been the rack extension so people can add in third-party synths, and of course very recently we've had finally VST plugin support. All of those things are great, but what you want, or at least what I want from a massive synthesizer workstation, is more synthesizers. And that's been a bit of a bugbear. It's been a bugbear for years. I mean, if you think about it, every update costs around about £100. So every update since Reason 4 through to now Reason 10 means that I've invested about £600 into Propellerheads Reason. And that's a lot of money to not get new synths, to not get a new way of making sound. You know, in many ways it seems that they just rely on the loyalty of the customer base, and it's fierce. That is true. I mean, in all the reviews that I've done online, my review of Reason 8 from a couple of years ago has had more views than any other video on my channel, by far, and tons and tons and tons of comments. People are very passionate about Reason. There's something about it which sort of draws you in and gives you an enormous amount of music making potential. It somehow manages to blend the right amount of sort of synthesis and ease of use and interesting routing and the possibility of creating enormous stuff while sticking in easy to use sampling and slicing and mixing and audio recording and writing and sequencing and patterns and all that kind of stuff. It's great. We love Reason. But personally, I felt just a little bit let down by the lack of new synthesizers. That's just what it is. I can't help that every time a new update comes around, you look at it and go, okay, there's some tweaks here and tweaks here, some changes here, a little bit of new something or other, but no new sounds. Every time, no new synth. It's become almost laughable. And it's fabulous, of course, that Propellerheads are now listening, but why has it taken them so long to hear what it is that people are after, that people want from Reason? I mean, perhaps they spent all of that listening trying to get over the VST hump. I mean, that took them long enough. I mean, maybe I suppose you could say that the reason that they haven't introduced any of their own new synths is because they want to encourage third-party rack extensions. Yeah, okay, that's fine, but why do we always have to pay extra? Why can't there be something new and interesting in the core of it? I mean, all of the tools within Reason are great, but they are old. They are long in the tooth. I mean, the matrix sequencer, you know, can we not do something more interesting and exciting with that? You know, is it perhaps time that the redrum got another button which does something? Or even perhaps it's time to grow up from the handwritten channel strips, maybe into something that looks a little bit more modern, a little bit nicer, a little bit more innovative. Everything else in Reason 10 appears to be the same. There don't appear to be any changes to the interface, to the design, to the layout, to the routing, to anything else that's going on, or at least nothing that they've announced. All they've talked about is the 2 new synths. Count them, 2 new synthesizers. Wow, can you believe it? So, all right, let's put all my issues and moaning to the side. What is it that's new in Reason 10? Well, 2 new synthesizers. One called Eurorack, which seems like kind of a bad Brexit joke, but essentially it's a wavetable synth with lots of spectral analysis and harmonics and interesting things going on. You can draw your own waveforms. It's great, awesome, fantastic, big, thick, impressive, epic sounds. The other one is a granular synth, which is great, on trend, granular synths. We like those. We don't understand them, but we like them. We like the slicing of samples and the way that algorithms pull out kind of clouds of noise. Look great. They look very standard. They don't look particularly innovative, but they fulfill their purpose as being a wavetable synth and a granular synth. Yep, that's something that Reason needed. Nice one. Next then we have 3 sampled instruments. So these are like instruments in contact, where you have a bunch of multi-samples and you have a nice interface drawn for them that's relevant to that content. And you've got one on tuned percussion, so glockenspiels, xylophones, wine glasses and things you tap, music boxes, plink-plonk stuff that's sort of very organic. Then you've got world instruments, so all those instruments that we never use but we like to put in to make something a little bit more ethnic in our music. So that's very nice. And the other one is the oohs and ahs of the human voice that never really sits very well in any track, ever, really, unless you're Enya, I suppose. So there you are, 3 sampled instruments, fantastic. Then on top of that, they've thrown in a piano, which is already part of the Rack extension expansion library, so they've thrown that in, and also a very complex and interesting LFO, which is nice. They've also stuffed in 3 gigs worth of more sounds, more presets, and more stuff. That's great. All right, we can take all of that. That's fine, thank you. That is Reason 10. That'll cost you $129 or around 100 quid to upgrade to. Is it enough? I don't know. Will we keep on moaning about it? I don't know, maybe. But having new instruments is awesome. And I'm going to be doing a full review as soon as it comes out. Well, probably a month or 2 after it comes out, because it takes me time to work through this stuff. But I'm very interested to see how, if anything has changed, how the workflow goes, how touch works, all the usual things I like talking about, to get down into the nitty-gritty of how a DAW operates and how that workflow really works, what's good, what's bad, and what it could do to become awesome. So hopefully it's not just a couple of new synths, hopefully there's something else in there to get our teeth into. But thank you, Propellerheads, for giving us a couple of new synths. That means a lot. That means a lot to me, personally. And finally, I'm having a massive clear out. It's all got to go. I've dug around in the back of the shed and pulled out everything that's possibly worth anything at all and stuck it up for sale. Why, I hear you ask? Well, a lot of the stuff I just don't use, and also I've got to somehow fund my modular habit. Somehow, I've got to find cash from somewhere to keep this thing alive. So what sort of things do we have? Well, we have a completely almost unused RedNet interface and a RedNet card. I've got a Tascam DA38, would you believe? A Native Instruments Maschine, an Arturia Spark LE, a Korg controller keyboard, and Elise's performance pad. I've got a copy of Complete Ultimate 8. I've got some Carillon computer cases, an Iomega zip drive, an original Sound Blaster version 2 sound card, and a copy of Doom on floppies with the Aliens and Star Wars mods. There's an old Indigo iMac in there, a Les Paul guitar. This is sounding like the end of the generation game. And possibly most exciting of all is my original Surface Pro 3. This is the one that started off all this Surface Pro audio business. All this talking about the Microsoft Surface and making music and all. This is the one that I started it all on a year or so ago. It's an i5, 8 gigs, 256 gigabytes of storage. It works with all known music software and hardware, at least as far as I've tested. And is a great little mobile, portable, high-class music making machine. It has an exclusive sticker on the back of some kind of modular thing that I put on with my Twitter handle. Here, look. It's an exclusive piece of hardware. There's only one of these in the world. And it comes complete with power supply and a digital pen. So if you'd like this, go and check out the website or any of the other gear that I'm selling. It's all there on the webpage with a price. The price includes delivery to any UK address. If you're in Europe or the USA, then of course it's going to cost a bit extra. So all you have to do is ask, and I'll let you know how much that will cost. First person to put the money down gets the gear. All of it's in surprisingly good condition. Just a few spiders and bits of dust on it. But otherwise, it's top class stuff that works really well, and just that I need to make room for other things. So the link to the website is in the bottom. It's just on the Multimedia Tech blog. Head on over there and grab yourself maybe a bargain, maybe a piece of history. That's it, that'll do for now. But if you're interested, this is what I'm working on now. I am working on a touch review of Bitwig 2. I will get that done, I swear. I'm working on the review of the S49 controller keyboard. Next up in Modular is doing a DIY build of a Turing machine. I'm looking to review traction waveform, and I'm going to be running every DAW known to man on the Surface Pro 2017. So all that and more, lots to do, and in the meantime, go and make some tunes.